And yay, we're live. Oh my goodness. Another great night of ghost stories and spooky
Yes.
stuff. I love it. I love this show. Hi, Cara. Hi, Brandi. Hi, Don.
Howdy.
Hi,
Hello.
everybody.
So exciting. We've got a lot of fun stories. We have our fact and fiction tonight. Sandra couldn't make it,
She's on an
tonight.
airplane.
She's on an airplane. And we want them to be safe. We didn't want her to go live. So anyway, we have some great stories today, and I'm going to go ahead and give it to Cara because we got to kind of hype our books and all that stuff first. So Cara, you've got it.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome, Don, our wonderful backup guest, who's always there when we need him, and hello, Brandy and Debbie. And I am so excited. We are so close to hitting our publishing date on book 3. We have it. It should be out before our next broadcast, or it should go live by before then. And it is the past lives of Deborah O'Hara, mystery at the Colombian Exposition. And this one is the closest to my heart because it is the present and the past are both in my beautiful hometown of Chicago.
Let me put up the photo of the 3 books. The third one on the right, that one will be hopefully published this coming week.
Yes, I am
Awesome.
so excited. And I absolutely love the covers and the detail
Yeah.
inside the mirrors. It is just amazing.
Yep, by Rebecca Wheeler. So gifted, so gifted. And they're just beautiful. They're just gorgeous. And buy the books because you can see all the details and stuff. It's really amazing.
Yes, and we do have some fun pictures in this book of old Chicago, which might be of a fun interest for everybody.
Yeah.
And
I will point out that Becky did not draw these pictures that will be in this book this time around. They are ones that were from back in the old days. So they are very authentic pictures.
yes, that is true.
Hi, Ellie.
Hi, Ellie.
Hello, Ellie.
So,
And how about this one?
oh, yes. The Shadows of Satan, Terror in the Mountains is my very first book. And I will say, there is no Satan in it. I keep telling people, Satan is a metaphor for like the evil that we do to each other, or the evil that comes out that's always lurking in the shadows of someone's mind. It's kind of a play on words, but it is supernatural. It is suspenseful. There are twists and turns, and you won't see the ending coming. I guarantee it. And all of our books are sold at Amazon. You can order them at any bookstore has them online, like Barnes and Noble. There's a bunch of them throughout the different cities that are the LGBTQ bookstores. So we are all over the place. And
Yep.
I will say it is time for Brandy's fact or fiction.
Yes, and hopefully Dad will get his thing back up and running. Um, so
I'm
as
here.
always, okay, as always, when we do fact or fiction, I'm not going to give you specific details as far as location or names. At the end of the show, if what I've said is fact, then I will tell you the details. If it's not, and it's just made up in my head, then there's no details. It's just something I made up. So tonight, I'm going to be telling you about an old haunted funeral home. Now, this funeral home was opened in 1909, and it was opened by a gentleman, and he was 40 years old. He had a wife, he had a son. His son was 18 and helped him with the funeral home. And he opened it as soon as he moved into this town. He became a very prominent community member. Everybody loved him. His business was respectful, and everybody respected him with his business. But in 1914, a tragedy struck, and the funeral home burnt to the ground and killed his wife and his 18-year-old son. There is no information on what caused the fire, so I can't tell you that detail. Um,
Brandy, can you hold on?
yeah.
Don, can you mute yourself? We're getting feedback. Okay, go ahead.
So it is hypothesized that it was burnt down just by due to malfunctioning electricity, that there was no like arson or foul play behind it. There's also no documentation of any burials for these family members, no memorial services, nothing has been documented for them. He would rebuild the funeral home on the same site in the exact same fashion. It looks exactly like it did before it burnt down. However, this time around, he did not run any business out of it. He boarded up the windows, he boarded up the doors, did nothing else with it, which raised a lot of suspicion as to why he would have done that. So, is it because he's building a memorial maybe for his dead family members? We don't know. Soon after he did that, there was several reports from people and complaints about loud screams and noises being heard in the middle of the night coming from that building, that they saw people or figures moving in and out of the building, even though the windows and the doors were boarded over. And it just made a lot of people uncomfortable. Eventually, the gentleman who made this funeral home would disappear from spotlights from anywhere. Nobody knows what happened to him. He just disappeared. There's no records to if he moved, if he died. We do not know. He just vanished one day. So, is this truly a haunted funeral home, or am I just making it up as I go along? That is for you all to decide tonight.
Well, I am not quite sure. But I'm going to hold off until the recap and see how everyone else is voting.
Me too.
So,
That is awesome.
I am throwing it back to you, Cara.
Thank you. Now, I will say, since I'm going to be making a trip up to my hometown of Chicago, I thought one of the, it's actually one of the biggest missing persons / murder cases that Chicago had seen up to that point, and it was one of the biggest mass searches ever done in the Chicago area. And I am talking about Barbara and Patricia Grimes, the Grimes sisters. Now, you may look at them and think that they're older, but Barbara there, she had just turned that year, she had just turned 15. And her sister Patricia was 3 days away from her 13th birthday when they disappeared on December 28th, 1956. And the backstory on them is these girls were inseparable, and they had such a love of Elvis Presley that they had just become members of his fan club, and they were headed out that evening to walk about a mile and a half to the theater to see Love Me Tender, Elvis's debut movie, for the 11th time. And now when they left the house, they had $2.50, which that was a lot of money back then. And they held back a little just in case they wanted to see the movie a second time, because their mom said it was okay as long as they were home before midnight. The friend of theirs, a school friend, actually sat behind them with her sister during the first showing, and said that they were giggling and laughing during the movie, and doing the whole, fangirl crying and stuff, when Elvis came on the screen, screaming. And she told the police, that when her and her sister left after the first showing, she saw them in line to get popcorn. So she assumed they were staying for the second showing of the movie. At about 11:45, their mom was starting to get a little worried. And by midnight, she was beside herself because she knew the movie would be out and they would just hop on one bus to come straight home. So she sent her older daughter, who was 17, and her son, who was 14, down to wait at the bus stop. And they watched as bus after bus went by and their sisters did not get off. So they made it back home dejected and told their mom that they didn't show up. And she started calling their friends' homes before she contacted the Chicago police. And I don't know if, at first people were assuming that they were runaways, which is ridiculous. They didn't take any of their prized possessions and they only took $2.50 of their earned money. They didn't take anything else. But it got so much attention that even Elvis Presley himself got on the radio and implored the girls to call their mother and to go home because they actually made Elvis believe that they had ran away, which I think probably caused a little bit of a gap in trying to find the girls. Now it had a heavy snow at the beginning of January, and the snow didn't start melting until the end of the last week of January, 22nd. The girls' bodies were found naked. Patricia was laying partway on top of Barbara, and Barbara was laying face down. And the autopsy showed that, yes, Barbara had been stabbed, and there were slashes and stabs on Patricia. However, their true cause of death was it was secondary shock from hypothermia. Had someone been looking for these girls, they were right over a guardrail off of a main road. If they had been looking for these girls may have survived. So that's the sad part. Now, where the hauntings come in is even sadder. Now, right near, within 30 yards of where the bodies were found, there was a home, like a mid-century modern home. And within days or within a week or so of the girls disappearing or their bodies being found, this house was abandoned. It was left as is. Not a thing was taken from this house. There was still dishes with food on the table. Whoever lived there, even the toys were still there. Whoever lived there, they didn't take a thing from their home. They just left. And mind you, the name of the road that they were found off of was called German Church Road. And that comes into play too. But the sad thing is that, there's several speculations. One speculation is that the family took off, was frightened because maybe the ghosts of the girls who had started now being seen, maybe their ghosts were trying to get justice for their murders and attached themselves to this family, and this family was terrified and left. Another one is that maybe the person or persons who lived there were responsible for their deaths because their killer has never been found. It's sad, but their killer has never been found. And even a retired sheriff who's retired now, retired sheriff's deputy from the area, he as a child, it was a big thing for people to go up to this abandoned house in the dead of night. You knew where they were found, and because everything was spooky. He had experiences there where he got close enough to the house and he saw a white figure with dark eyes and dark hair staring back in this empty house. Terrified him and his friends, and they took off. And there were other kids who would get close there. They would dare each other to go into this abandoned house and things. And the house was there until the 80s, till it burned down. But they would go and they would have something terrifying and they wouldn't go back there again. And even the road itself is said to be haunted by kind of a memory in time. What happens is that you'll be on the road in the dark of night and you will hear a car driving down the road. You will not see headlights. You will not see anything. But the car will stop right by the guardrail where these girls were found on the other side. And then you hear a door open and a door slam. Then you hear a trunk open and you hear thuds to the ground. And the trunk closes and then the car drives off. But it's never seen. No headlights, nothing. But this is a frequent occurrence, as if this part of the girls being dumped is having to be played over and over and over for eternity. And they actually call it the ghost car of German Church Road for this reason. Now, I have my suspicions about about the house. I mean, either the family was terrified and just up and left, or maybe when they saw all the police presence and maybe they were the perpetrators, they didn't even pack anything and they just took off. But I mean, leaving food on plates. I mean, something either terrified them or they had something to run. And sometime in the 80s, the house burned down, but you can still feel that presence where the house stood and where the girls' bodies were found. And you know, their brother is still living and he has not given up hope that someday, even though the person may not be able to be prosecuted, maybe it's someone who's already died, that someday they will find the person who murdered his beloved sisters.
You know what, Cara? You know, in my gut is like somebody that was a family member, if you know, could have done it, and they found out, and everything was hitting the fan, and they all just took off.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something about that house that connects it to the girls. There's definitely something there. But that car, that's so, because you think about it, even if someone in that house had committed the murders, they still would have had to drive their car down to the road in order to dump them where they did.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't have been able to drag them that far from the house in the dead of winter.
No, I figured that they may have been at the movie or
Saw
picked
them
them up
there, yeah.
somewhere. Picked them
Yeah.
up somewhere, and it was familiar road for them to go on.
Well,
Dumped them and went home, and then when everything hit the fan and everybody found out, it was drop the food and out.
I will say that it was an unusually cold night that night. Oh, and by the way, the stomach contents in their body said that they didn't live past 4 to 8 hours after they disappeared. Because their stomach contents, they still had minute traces of the popcorn and different things. But, their mom was adamant that they never would have gotten in a car willingly. But how low the temperatures dropped suddenly and the way that they were dressed to go to the movies earlier when it was warmer, they may have thought, well, or maybe someone could have said, oh, my daughter goes to your school, something to get them to go into the car with them. And then, it was probably the biggest mistake they could have made. But, or they were out and out dragged into a car, refused to get in, kept walking, and, maybe they missed the bus, and so they just decided to walk. But yeah.
When I read it, Cara, I think it said they didn't have any other marks on their body.
No, Barbara had a stab wound just below her chest, which the coroner had said she could have survived with medical attention. There were some slash marks on Patricia, the younger one, like where she was defensive things, like she was trying to defend herself. But they thought that maybe they were knocked unconscious, thought to be dead because she was bleeding from the wound below her chest, and her sister had all the scuffs and slashes on her. But they didn't have anything that would have been a fatal wound. Everything could have been survived. It was basically that secondary shock and hypothermia. The combination of maybe the blood loss, the hypothermia, how cold it was. They were naked completely. Their clothes were taken, and and nothing was ever found. They searched all over there. No clothes were ever found in that area. Nothing of theirs.
Were they knocked out? Because they could have just. I saw the pictures of the snow. There's a lot of snow, so I can understand hypothermia. But were they? Did they get
Well,
a head
they
knocked
think
out?
they think they were probably knocked out. But they were still alive when they were thrown into that snow. Barbara might have died quicker because she had the injury, she had the stab wound. She was lying face down, and then Patricia's body was partially over her head, like they have just been tossed there. They might
Yeah.
have been left for dead. They might have thought they were dead, or they figured they would die in the cold. And like I said, then it started snowing a couple days later, and I feel strongly that if they hadn't thought that they had been runaways, if they had taken it more seriously and listened to the family, even the father who was remarried at the time, um, he was adamant. He's the one who had to go and ID the children because his ex-wife just was not strong enough. But I think if they had listened and they had maybe started the search earlier and retraced their steps and things like that, they would have been found, and maybe they would have lost a toe, maybe they would have lost a limb, something, but maybe they would have been alive. It's just,
Yeah, that's too bad.
and now they're stuck in limbo because you know, they're always there and obviously reliving their deaths.
Hey, had they been sexually assaulted?
Yes, I believe they did say that they had been sexually assaulted.
When I read it, it was only the oldest one, I
Yeah.
believe. They said she had relations, and there was no in the article I read, there was no. They couldn't tell if it was rape. She had relations. That kind of made me mad.
Yeah. Well, there was actually a Cook County coroner employee who got fired because he was trying to say that these two young girls were girls of ill repute and accused them of being prostitutes, and that maybe they hit the wrong John or something. All of Barbara's friends said that she would never have had relations with anyone. So it's most likely that she was raped.
Right.
Patricia, they didn't see any signs of her doesn't mean she wasn't molested, but they didn't see any signs of actual penetration on her. But yeah, Barbara definitely was, and I do believe she was raped. I believe 100% she was a good Catholic girl. She was all of her friends said she was so innocent. She wouldn't do anything without asking her mom, or talking to her mom. She had a very good relationship with her. So I don't believe that she would have done anything willingly.
Well, this trauma has, probably turned things on to where they are, earthbound, and they're, walking the earth and in spirit. That's why people can see them.
Yeah. But
That's
yeah,
really a shame. Even to this day, I wish that they had more out there of, of what to do in certain, circumstances, and to, not be friendly to people that can do things. I was part of a kidnapping, and I made sure it didn't happen. But I was very nice. I was so nice. But anything could have, happened in the circumstances. I just made sure, that I wasn't going to be taken. And so when I got strong views about when these things happen, that we really need to, we don't want to scare, young adults, or, guys are kidnapped in their 20s. I mean, you guys, we need to make sure that this is stopping, because more and more I get missing persons cases, and it's just too much. We need to know what to do in the circumstances, and this is very tragic. and then that people are seeing their ghost is even more, concerning.
Yeah. But it was the tragic tale of the Grime sisters, and it affected my mom. My mom lived a few miles from them, and so everyone was scared for their daughters. And my mom was the same age as Barbara. She was not allowed to go anywhere without a big gaggle of friends. She could not go out one on one with someone.
Right.
But Don, I know that you have an awesome funeral home tale to tell. Oh, you're muted.
Dad.
You're muted.
Now I'm not. Okay, actually, since Brandi did something about a funeral home and it's kind of on the same scenario, I don't want to get stuff confused. So I do got another one, though. We have the Ferris Theater here in Richmond, and it's like 1904 vintage. There was a lot of slave stuff happening in it. There was a lot of underground tunnels leading to and from the basement area of it. And it's definitely haunted. They actually went through and totally gutted the inside of it because they couldn't get rid of the presences in the theater because they had secured themselves to the chairs, the curtains, everything. And so they did. They just totally tore it out, re-gutted it, and rebuilt it. And it still didn't get rid of everything. There's still stuff going on. But there'll be times that nobody will be in there and projectors will just start. The old guy that used to run it, his name was Ross Manning. And he said it wouldn't be nothing for him to be sitting there watching the movie from upstairs out of the projector room, and all of a sudden the projector just go off. He said not shut off, physically be turned off. Reels, the big rolls of film would be switched up to where he would actually load wrong ones halfway through the movies. There was a usher that fell off the balcony back in the early 1930s, and he died there at the floor. Now, they say that he still walks that area, and every time there is it's not so much to movies, but when they have a venue, that he'll be there showing up.
And that area, that theater, is where
Wow.
like we've done school plays and stuff in it because they did the renovations on it when I was in high school. So yeah, there is, you do get that vibe that there is something there more than just one.
Yeah. But it's attached to another big area building. It's got the AAs in it. It's got the Friends of the Ferris, which is a theater group, and then it's got some band stuff. I'm trying to think what's on the other side. Oh, the other side are just apartments, but it's definitely. Hey, that was a pretty good picture. And it's definitely got a bad feeling in it. If you go up to the loft area, and it goes up two big massive staircases and does a complete spiral. And when you get up to it and you start towards the main walkways to go down into the balcony area, it's almost like you get pushed. There's maybe somebody reaching up and grabbing your shirt tail, or there were several females up there that got shoved down the stairs, not off the balcony, but down into the balcony area, and there was nobody around them.
Yep.
Wow. That is wild. That reminds me of the theaters we had in Chicago, the old-timey ones.
Mm-hmm.
The grand theaters.
It's like a lot of those old time theaters are haunted.
Yes.
Yeah, go to the old Chelsea in Kansas City. You want a haunted theater.
Oh,
That's where
I've
they
heard of that one.
That's where they had all the burlesque at.
Yeah, I've heard of that one.
Yeah.
That is wild.
It is.
Now, I know Brandy's got a really long one going on. She's got the original What Happened to Flight 401 and then all the paranormal that happened after.
Yes, I did a deep dive research into this all week because it interested me. So let me start you off with what happened to the original Eastern Air Flight's Flight 401. It was brand new, first flight out, so you wouldn't think there'd be any issues with it. They was flying a regular scheduled flight from John F. Kennedy International Airport in Queens to Miami International Airport in Miami, Florida. Now, on the day of the crash, Flight 401 was using a Lockheed L-1011-1 TriStar, which had just been, it had literally just been delivered to this aircraft, and it was their first time using it. Now, the whole flight there's no issues at all. They didn't have any problems throughout the flight. It was coming into landing that they had their first issue. Now, inside your cockpit, you had two pilots and you had your aircraft engineer because it was a big plane. And your main pilot was Bob Loft, and he had been a veteran. He ranked 50th in the seniority at Eastern. And his co-pilot had been, hold on, I'm trying to find where I wrote his name down. Sorry, guys. John or Bert Stockhill. And he had 5,800 hours of flying experience with that type of plane. And then your flight engineer, his name was Donald, but everybody called him Don. His name was Don Repo. And he had over 15,000 hours, yeah, I saw you, Dad, of flying experience. So with the three of them, they were very accomplished airline pilots and the engineer, okay? So you would think that they could handle pretty much a lot of the situations that would be thrown at them. What the issue was, when they put the landing gear down to land, they have lights that light up for each one of the landing gears. So each one in the back, there's two in the back, would have a light for each set, and the front one would have a light. The nose one did not light up. So they did not know if the landing gear had actually locked into place, meaning they could not land safely. So they called down to the ground and said, we need time to figure this out because we don't know if we have a landing gear. So they put them in a hold pattern over the Everglades while the pilots try to figure out what the issue was. Now, Don thought that it was a burnout light. He was pretty positive it was just a burnout light and the landing gear head went down. But since they didn't know for sure, they did the first step they thought of, which was to take the light out and see if the bulb was burnt. Now, because of where Repo was sitting behind the two pilots, he could not comfortably reach in front of them to do this. So one of the pilots had to do it. So they put it on autopilot while the co-pilot tried to take this light thing out and see if it was burnt. And it took them forever to get this light out. It just did not want to come out. They finally get it out. They look at it. They can't tell if it's burned or not. So they go to put it back in. And when they did, they put it in sideways. So now they can't get it out to fix it because now it's jammed in there. And while they're doing this, it dawns on Loft that, I'll just send Repo down into the cockpit, the underside of the cockpit. There's a cabin area that you can see the landing gear in. And it's called the hellhole. And he's like, Repo, go down the hellhole and tell me if the gear is down. So Repo goes down. Now, the problem is the pilot didn't think to turn the light on in that compartment. So when Repo got down there, he couldn't see anything. So he comes back up and he says, I can't see nothing. So the pilot flips it on and he goes back down in there. And at that point, they hit ground. Now, what went wrong? They think that when they was messing with the light, one of the pilots accidentally hit their steering column. And when they did, they knocked it out of autopilot. So that is the assumption they're making. And that when it went down at such an angle that you didn't notice. It was just like a gradual slight going down. It wasn't like a straight dive bomb into the ground. So by the time anybody knew that there was a problem, it was too late. They'd already hit ground. And they hit in the middle of the Everglades. So big swamp, muddy ground. You literally, it actually saved lives where it landed at because it cushioned the plane when it landed. It did cause a big fireball, but it burnt out almost instantly because of all the swamp mud and water. Sadly, a lot of people did die. I mean, people did live, but a lot of them did die. So total count, including crew, there was 176 occupants on this plane. 101 of them did not make it. The other ones that did make it was because of Robert Bud Marquise, who was an airboat pilot and was out frog gigging at night. Now, if you don't know what frog gigging is, I'll give you a quick synopsis. You have a gigging pole, you're out there, and you're trying to catch frogs for frog legs. That is the whole purpose of it. And you're using a little spotlight on your head trying to find the frogs while you're gigging them. He took his airboat and rushed to the crash scene. And him and his partner that was on, Ray Dickinson was with him, they pulled as many survivors as they could out of the swamp. Because when it crashed, there were people still trapped in their seats. And the seats were now sitting with their faces in the water, holding them in. So they rescued as many as they could. It's speculated that a lot of the people that did die actually survived the crash. It was the aftermath of the crash they did not survive. So it was very sad. It was tragic. Now, with all that being said, we're going to move ahead a little bit. So a year to 2 years later, we start getting reports of hauntings on other planes. All of them are the L-1011-1 TriStar, the same type of plane. In the hauntings range in reports, and they're all for Eastern Airlines, the same company. They downplayed it and tried to hide it from the public that these reports were being made. They didn't want it to get out. If you tried to report it, you would get fired. I mean, they would terminate you because they did not want rumors going around about their flights. Now, I'm only going to cover a couple of the hauntings. One of them involved two of the airline stewardess. And it was in the kitchen area. Now, the kitchen area is on the bottom half of the flight, so it's below like where the passengers are. And you have little elevators that will take you down to it. One of them was down there preparing the meals for the flight, and one of the stewardess thought she'd go down and see if she needed any help. So she got in one of the elevators and went down. Meanwhile, the one that was down there got on the other elevator and went up at the same time. So they passed each other without realizing it. So Jenny is the one that went up, and I'm using fake names here, guys. And Dorothy is the one that went down. Now, when Jenny got off up there to look for Dorothy, the other stewardess said that she'd went down below. So she turns around, gets back on the elevator, and she goes back down. Well, when she gets down there, she doesn't see Dorothy. Now, these kitchen areas are very narrow, okay? It's not a very wide space to move around in. But there's also a lounge area for the crew past the kitchen area that they can go in and sit and lounge on long flights, especially overnight flights where they don't really need the whole crew up and around moving in the pilot or the passenger area. So she thought Dorothy was probably in the lounge. So she just keeps going on, Jenny does, making the plates and stuff. And she gets this sensation that there's somebody in there with her, that there's somebody there watching her. And it builds stronger and stronger and stronger. So she finally goes and checks the lounge, thinking Dorothy's in there waiting to surprise her or scare her. You know, a trick, a prank. Nobody's in that room. But as soon as she enters it, she gets immediately a cold sensation. The hairs on the back of her neck stand up and a cold sweat breaks out. And she freaks out. So she bolts for the elevator, goes back up the elevator, and when she gets off, she runs out of it and bounces off of another stewardess. And we're going to call her Mildred. Now, Mildred takes one look at her and knows something happened. She is pale, she's sweaty, she's panting. She knows something happened. And she asked her what went on. And she's like, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. And she said, hold on one second. Come with me. And she takes her to the back of the plane where the passengers can't see. And there is Dorothy sitting there looking exactly the same way. So what had happened was when Jenny went up looking for Dorothy and she had went down, Dorothy had the same experience happen to her and freak her out. So the moment she runs and gets on the elevator, Jenny gets on the other elevator and they pass each other again. So these two women have the same exact experience 2-3 minutes apart without ever seeing or talking to each other to pass on their stories. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that is one of the hauntings that they talked about. Another one is about a mysterious pilot setting in first class. Now, back then, crew members that needed to be on a plane, but they wasn't where that plane was sitting at, would hop a ride on another plane to get there. It was called deadheading. And back then they didn't really sign in to do it. They just checked the manifest and said, oh, they got an open seat, I'll go get on this plane. And that's how they did it. There was no really, well, let me write down what I'm doing. So when the head stewardess was doing her count of passengers to make sure everybody was on the plane and they didn't have any extras, she came up with one extra. So she did her recount and noticed that one of the people in the first class was wearing a pilot's uniform. And she immediately thought, okay, he's probably deadheading. So she goes over there to get his information to make sure that's what he's doing, and stands right in front of him. And he's like looking straight forward with his hat on, so you can't see his face. And she asks him, are you deadheading? What is your name? And he makes no response, doesn't act like he's heard her, nothing. So she asks like 3 times, to the point where another stewardess notices and comes over to try to help. And still no response from this guy sitting here. So she finally goes and gets the pilot and says, I'll let the pilot handle this. The pilot comes out and gets down, bends down and looks directly in this person's face to see who it is, because, he's worked there for several years. He knows all the pilots basically. And as soon as he sees the face, he falls backwards and screams out, oh my God, it's Loft. He had been friends with Loft. He knew Loft. He recognized Loft.
Oh God.
The moment he said that person vanished. Now, 13 passengers saw this too. It wasn't just these 3. The passengers saw it too. They did an immediate search of the plane, found nobody extra. And that happened on several other flights. It wasn't just this one plane. It was other planes of the same make for that company. So it was reported several times. Another case was where a crew member went down into the hellhole because he had heard noises down there. So he went down to check it, and when he came back up, climbing up the ladder back into the cockpit, he looked up, and Don Repo was standing right there looking back at him.
Oh,
and then he vanished. Now, it wasn't always just scary things. At one point in time, Don Repo's ghost actually saved a flight. So a pilot had boarded the plane, was getting ready to do his checklist, because they got to do all these long checklists before they can fly. And Don Repo appeared and told him about a malfunction in an engine. Now, this pilot, for some reason, didn't freak out. He actually listened to Don Repo and had the mechanic check the engine before flying, and found out that the malfunction that Don Repo had said was actually there and present in that engine. He had saved that flight. So all of these accounts are happening with all these planes. Well, come to find out, the reason they're happening is that when Flight 401 crashed, it was the way it crashed, not all of the components on it were damaged. They went through rigorous tests, passed the tests, and were reused on other planes. And they think that's why all these planes are now haunted by these crew members, because they're attached to those pieces. Now, Eastern Airlines eventually went through and removed every piece of 401's machinery off of all these other planes, giving no reason behind why they was doing so, and still denying the hauntings.
Oh, they denied actually having the parts on there for a while.
Yeah. But after they removed all these parts, guess what happened? No more hauntings. So, and before anybody thinks it's bad to use those parts, it was common practice back then, because the airplane parts are very expensive. So if they can be salvaged and reused, companies are going to do that to save a dime. It's just business. But it was very interesting to find out that it wasn't just one plane that got haunted because of it. It was several planes that were haunted because of this one crash. So that is the end of that story, ladies.
I have to say, I remember the movie.
You remember the movie?
And I was a kid. I must have been like 7 or 8 years old. And I remember this movie called The Ghost of Flight 401. And I remember my mom, it was one of those movie of the weeks. I can't remember if it was ABC or NBC, one of them. But I remember my mom turning all the lights off because it was, ooh, a ghost. And watching it, and I remember a specific scene where the ghost is, his image is seen in like, not microwave, but like an oven, glass door thing of something that they
Yeah, I
used to
think
cook.
they used that to
And-
represent the kitchen hauntings, although there was never actually
Yeah,
ghost seen. It was just felt.
right. And he pointed to something, and the stewardess followed to where he was pointing, and it was something that saved the plane or something. I mean, I was a kid, but I remember that specifically because I remember his face. Like, they really did really good makeup, that he had a gaunt facial expression like a ghost. And then he just dramatically points, and she like follows it. That's all I remember of it. But
Do you remember Ernest? I think it was Ernest Borgnine was a pilot or something.
Yeah, he was in it. I don't remember if he played. Did he play Rico or Luft in the movie?
If you're asking me, I've
know.
never watched the movie. I don't know.
How dare you not know that? I will tell you, Eastern Airlines did try to sue the man who wrote the book. His name was like it was either Fuller or Fullest or something with an F. He wrote a book which was turned into the movie that I remember as a child, and they ended up backing out of it, but probably because they knew that the parts, they took these parts out after all these things were happening, and then they had all the employees scared of losing their jobs, so they all said, "Oh, nothing ever happened, trying to make it like go away."
Yeah,
was John Fuller, I think it said.
Is it John Fuller? I'm lucky. I remember that it started with an F. I was a kid.
John G. Fuller. Yeah.
Okay, I was a kid.
1976.
Yeah.
See, I don't know what is worse: the fact that they died, some people died during the plane crash, or the fact that they landed in the Everglades swamp, and the ones that did not die right away, alligators, people, alligators.
Yeah. Oh, and
Plus
also gangrene.
Yep, the mud that's there is full of gangrene.
Oh,
so
yeah.
the wounds and stuff were infected. So the people that didn't die right off died later in the hospital because of these infections. It was, I don't know which is worse.
Yeah. Well, I know that the CEO of Eastern Airlines was that one astronaut. God, what was his name? He was an astronaut, but anyways, he called it complete garbage about the ghost stories, and he tried to cover up the fact that there were any parts used at all. And I can't think of his name, but he was totally hypocrite.
I remember the crash. I was an adult, and it was so horrific at the time. All the everything that was being told on the news and everything was just horrible. Thinking that things are flying out and people are submerged and all this stuff going on. But the wildlife, all of that stuff they were talking about, and people just couldn't get over it. And all the pictures we got were even at night lights, and they're trying to salvage. People can go on and look at the images online also of how it was kind of broken apart and everything. But everything that we got was just scary as anything as to what was happening with these people and who they could get out and all of that. It was really a huge national tragedy.
Yeah, I'm curious. Dad, do you remember that crash?
Yeah, I remember it. It was pretty bad. The only part about that story that really bothers me is the fact of how the plane came down with nobody knowing it, because that's actually an Airbus is what that's, layman's term for it is. And they have no yoke or nothing. They're all flown by a joystick. And you're right. All it takes is to bump the joystick to get it go down. But there's so many alarms on these planes that somebody would have noticed it, because there's descent alarm, there's altitude alarm, there's more alarms on it than alarms.
Yeah, that's what I thought was weird.
Yeah, that's what I say. There's did they get the black box and the voice recorder
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
according to the black boxes, an alarm did sound once, and it was barely audible.
Maybe there's
That's
something
hard to
wrong with it. Yeah.
Well, that's hard. I don't know if any of you guys have ever been around airplanes much, but that's hard to believe. There is so many safeties, especially on these Airbuses, because they're 100% computer controlled. There is no manual input at all because you're just flying them by a joystick. But I know Bill French, he's a local pilot here, and that's what he flies now is Airbuses. And he said they are the easiest thing to get screwed up on. He goes, but they're also one of the safest ones out there.
Yeah.
But
I think part of the problem is that there might have been a malfunction in the computer system.
there could have been.
And I mean, because I mean, this is 1972. There was a lot of things that were changed after a lot of those flights that went down in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
That they, so it's possible that it could have been just blind, bad luck. Everything just like this alarm didn't go off and this one didn't go off, and they just were oblivious. It was just sad.
Well, though, you would have thought that the pilots or even the navigator, that he would realize that they were descending. I mean, you're at 34,000 feet and now we hit the ground. I mean, damn, we fell 30,000 feet without even realizing it.
I know. I think I would have, as a passenger, I would have felt that.
Yeah, and you would have been looking out the window.
Yeah, and it would be like, why are we descending here? Yeah.
Yep. In the reports, they said the reason they did not notice that was because it was pitch black. They could not see the horizon. But I'm still saying, correct me if I'm wrong, Dad, because I've never been in a cockpit. But don't they have altimeter things up there that tell you how high you are?
Oh, sweetheart, that's what I was just saying.
Yeah.
You got so many alarms, gauges, descent, angle. You got your artificial horizon. You got your artificial dive controls. There's just something. There's just something not there. And then, Florida's full of airports. Where the hell was the radar? Where was the controllers?
Yeah.
I mean, they should have saw pardon the expression, they should have saw it go down or starting down and saying, hey, dudes, pull your ass up. Your nose is going to hit.
Yeah.
Yeah, something.
That's what I said. It's almost like, but then again, you said that they did get the black box. So, that records everything that's said.
Yep, they have the pilot's last words of communication, and not one of them made any comment toward the descent or any sign that they knew they was in distress. They was all focused on that light.
Dumbasses.
Yeah.
But can you imagine crashing in the middle of pitch black?
Yep.
Oh my gosh. And living for a while.
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, they had to have snipers watching while they was picking up the bodies and stuff because of the alligators and the snakes. And so they had snipers.
Hey, Brandi, do you remember Michelle Mason from Florida?
Yes.
Okay, my girlfriend. That's how her dad died. Not in that crash, but he was coming along Gator Alley and had a blowout, and he ended up flying up into the canal, and that's what got him was the gators.
Yeah, I would not want to go that way.
Not good. Oh my goodness, this was like crazy story.
I know. Now Brandi's got to give her fact or fiction recap, and we got to vote.
Yes, we do. All right, so recap. Mine was about a funeral home that was established in 1909. A husband, wife, and son. In 1914, the funeral home burnt to the ground, killing the wife and son. And the husband rebuilt it to look identical to the way it had looked, and then boarded the windows and the door up. And after doing such, there was reports of screams and mysterious activities going on around it. And the funeral home owner just kind of vanished. So that's your recap. Is it fact or fiction?
Fiction.
Yeah,
when you said 1909, so 1909, I was like, oh, everybody says 1909. I'll say I'll go opposite, and I'll say it's fact.
Tiebreaker.
You had me up until you said that he boarded the whole place up and disappeared, and I'm like, that's creepy enough for me to really have known that if it happened. So I'm going to have to go with fiction. And I'm probably wrong.
So, I don't see any guesses in our guest chat tonight. And since we're
Where do
running
you
low on
see
time,
that? Where do you see the guest chats?
You click on comments, and all the comments for the show are up on the side.
Oh, way over there.
Yeah.
so
Well, I'll be damned. Look at that. Hi, guys.
so since we're running low on time, I'll go ahead and tell you the answer. The only one of you that was right was Debbie.
Oh.
It is fact.
So it was fact.
It was fact. E.L. Craven was the name of the funeral home owner. It was in Blackshear, Georgia, 1909 to 1914. And after he vanished, of course, you know, the stories build upon themselves. But these are actually reports that you can find in the newspapers from that time. So,
Brandi, that particular person you're talking about, he has a kinfolk in Lexington that has a funeral home.
Oh, which funeral home?
Okay, well, I just lost what you said.
Craven.
Because it was Linda Craven's husband's grandfather that had it.
Wow, I did not know that. So see,
Well,
it was fact.
There you go, something to look up for.
Okay, so I am totally flabbergasted and pissed off at myself because it was in Georgia. I should know this.
Yes, you should.
I lived there long enough I should have known that, especially with the amount of creepy funeral homes that are located around there.
Yes.
Everything's
you should.
creepy in Georgia.
What's up for next week?
Well, next week is the Fact or Fiction will be done by me and Sandy and I, and we're going to be coming from live in Chicago, so we're going to figure out some spooky haunts that maybe we might be able to walk to, if the weather is permitting. I'm not freezing on myself.
Oh, come on.
I
Take
know.
one for the team.
Yeah,
you don't know. It's Windy City for the politicians, but also for the wind. Let's see how
Yeah,
cold
I'm
it
from
is.
misery too.
Here it was 90 today.
Oh, hush.
It's 48 now.
It was 47 here today.
It was in the 60s today, high 60s, but it's now 45. So,
And we had our first freeze this morning.
oh gosh, we didn't have that.
Only your first? Dang.
Yep.
I'm coming
Yeah,
home, Dad.
Okay, the tomatoes and stuff don't look real good right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna see. Maybe Sandy and I can take a trip to Resurrection Cemetery
Oh, that'd be cool.
and do our show live from the gates.
I was gonna say, are you sure you want to go through a cemetery at nighttime though?
You can't go through it unless you want to climb over an iron fence, and I'm not getting myself stabbed on the top by their.
I got some bolt cutters.
Nobody
I
gets arrested.
I guess I could actually call the cemetery and ask them if we can do a podcast. Since they do have security there at night. Maybe they'll allow us in.
Well, that would be cool.
So
Just
we'll
remember,
see.
you don't have me there to drag you out of it when you freak out.
That is true. The two empaths going in there alone. But there's a couple of different things, but I'll have to see what Sandy's willing to do.
Well, maybe you'll get lucky and you'll run into a bunch of Druid worshipers.
Oh yeah, we have those all I have to do is go to the forest preserves in Chicago for that.
Yeah. Talking about tree huggers.
Yeah, we got a lot of them there. But yeah, this has been a great show, and I'm so happy that Don was able to join us. And yeah, watch us next week. We want to have some fun stuff, and who knows what kind of craziness Sandy and I'll get into trouble in the city.
Sweet. I'll bail you out.
There you go. All right, take care, guys. Have a great night and a great rest of your weekend.
Good
Thank
night,
you too.
everyone.